Hello and welcome back to Ticket Talks, and together with Polaron Language Services we are looking to use language to connect community. And whilst Polaron is the sponsor of our program, all views and opinions in the segment are of course our own. I would also like to acknowledge, that this segment is being held on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and I pay my respects to elders both past, present and future as well. And I am joined by Director of Polaron Language Services, Eva Hussein, and you've got Dominic Carter with you as well from Polaron. Guys, thank you so much for coming into the studio.
Thank you, Mike.
No worries. Now, what's been happening at Polaron at the moment? What updates and news have you got for us this week?
So I brought along an interesting project because on the 28th of July, we're celebrating Liver Day.
Liver Day?
Liver Day, yes. We're looking after our livers. And it's the World Hepatitis Day, actually, which is a disease which has been noted by the World Health Organization as top 9 diseases in the world. So people don't think of your liver as something that's important, but without your liver, you cannot function. So here on the screen, you are seeing a couple of projects that we have developed with Hepatitis Victoria. And Liver Well is the name of the project, and you can see that we've got a symbol for liver, because, you know, how do you present liver
it's a
visually?
good communication tool with the cartoon little character. It's hard to ignore.
Absolutely. So 28th of July, look after your liver all year round.
Well, that would be the advice, wouldn't it? Yeah. And what have you seen this week in terms of miscommunication? You bring me something interesting each week.
Yes, we do. So today we're going to be talking about artificial languages, and we've got a couple of very special guests. But when we were researching for the program, we found bots that started talking to each other. So when we talk about artificial languages or artificial intelligence, there is some fear around what might happen if humans are no longer in charge, and this is actually what happened with Facebook. So they had this research project which is called Artificial Intelligence Research Project, as it is. And what they discovered is that the bots started negotiating with each other and developed their own language based on English. However, humans could no longer understand what they were talking about. And because this was an experiment, they quickly disconnected the bots and told them where to go. But essentially, what language bots can do is talk to each other and negotiate. So they were negotiating purchasing of hats or something like that. But it goes to show that humans are still in charge, but are they?
Something so simple as hats could one day be nuclear weapons. I don't know. I've seen Terminator too many times at all.
You know me, Mike, I'm cynical.
Yeah.
But yes. So but they were able to step in and just, they worked out that they were talking to each other in a language that was based in English, but their own. So.
Unreal. Well, following on from that, our main topic for today, artificial language, is it gibberish or genius? Since the beginning of civilization, language has been used as a means to communicate and has naturally progressed and changed over time. Yet, since 1879, over 300 artificial languages have been introduced or invented. Some well-known ones include Esperanto, Klingon, and Dothraki. So, how are these languages created, and are they complete gibberish or works of genius? I had to do the Dothraki one there. But let's bring in our guest for today. We've got Dominic with us here in the studio, and Senior Lecturer in Linguistics at Macquarie University, Nick Wilson. Thank you for joining us from outside the studio.
Hi there, thanks.
All right, so Nick, I'll start with you. We've all heard of these languages, Klingon, etc. One was created to bring about world peace, the other was for a movie franchise. What's involved in creating an artificial language? What goes into this sort of thing?
Well, I guess it starts off with why the language is being created. So if you take something like Klingon or Dothraki, then it's being created for entertainment purposes, really. It's kind of more like a kind of linguistic art, right? So a lot of it's to do with helping develop characterization. But for other languages like Esperanto, there's much more of a kind of functional goal where they're designed to actually be used. So one of the first steps that a language creator needs to take is, work out what the building blocks are. So they need to start off, if it's going to be a spoken language, then they need to work out what the sounds are going to be that make up the language. Is it going to be a language that has, for example, a th sound? Because, many languages don't. Is it going to be a language that uses tone as a way of constructing meaning? Or is it going to use volume, for example? There's lots and lots of different options. Then they have to think about the grammar. They have to think about how these words are put together. They can think about all the different things that we see in the world's languages. So there's many things we don't have in English that you could have in a constructed language, or that you find in other languages as well. For example, ways of marking the difference between inclusive we and exclusive we, which we don't do in English. Ways of marking plural you, which we don't do in English. There's all sorts of different things that you can do, and it's up to a language creator to decide what features they want to put into a language and why they might want to do it.
Following on from that, Dominic, I understand you're a Star Trek fan. Is that the case? And what have you seen within the program in terms of the use of language?
So yes, I am definitely a Star Trek fan. I've come from a family of Star Trek fans, and we all watch it, and we all language aficionados in some way or another. So we talked about, Nick mentioned Klingon, and so did you. So Klingon is one language that was invented for Star Trek. It goes to characterization and the cultural aspect. The Klingons are proud warriors, and they don't have a word for hello. For example, that's a feature they don't put in. They just say, "What do you want?" when they walk into something. And they insult their mothers by saying they've got smooth foreheads, things like that. But that goes to sort of characterize people. But of course, in Star Trek, mostly they speak English because they want the viewers to understand it. So you've got to balance, on the one hand, the authenticity of aliens in space with speaking English. So Klingons appear, and generally you hear them speak English because everybody has something known as a universal translator, which is a convenient tool which, from limited samples, manages to translate for you in English, which explains why everybody speaks English in Star Trek, which is something they've not tried to do in other sci-fi series or in a lot of franchises. In Star Wars, English is a sort of global galactic language, a lingua franca of sorts. Yeah. And there are alien races that speak something cosmetically described as a language, but really it was sound engineering rather than linguistic exercise in creating a language. But in Star Wars, definitely they've made the effort of creating the language. Not all of them. They've got lots of alien races where it's more of a cosmetic exercise. But in Klingon, you can read Shakespeare. You can translate Shakespeare. Yeah, absolutely. There's Klingon versions of Shakespeare plays. You can read Tolkien's Hobbit or whatever.
I understand Elvish is quite a popular one from the Tolkien universe as
yes,
well.
Yes, Elvish, there are two forms of Elvish. I don't know why I know this. And one of them was inspired by Welsh.
Yep.
So in essence, these are not really real languages, but they're made to sound foreign to the viewer's ear. And they assume that not many people speak Welsh, so they go, okay, we'll inspire ourselves from Welsh. And another form of Elvish is inspired by Finnish and ancient Greek.
Clever.
Absolutely.
Very clever. I find that very clever. I'm glad you brought up Star Wars as well, because I'm a Star Wars fan. But Nick, I'll just jump over to you for a moment. Do artificial languages evolve in the same way that natural languages do? Do you know of any constructed languages that became natural languages, just as an example?
For a language to really evolve in a way that you speak, it needs to have people speaking it as a first language. And aside from Esperanto, there are no constructed languages that have really taken off in that respect. I do believe that someone did teach their child how to speak Klingon, but you need more than one first language speaker of a language in order for things to happen, because you need children to be learning a language and then start playing around with it in their communication. That's how we end up with new languages. That's how we end up with things like new dialects forming languages, but it's also one of the formation principles of what leads to Creole languages as well. When we get multiple languages, kind of mushed together in some kind of contact situation and a new language emerges, it's usually because children have really adapted a lot of the rules from both or multiple languages to create a whole new language. So we don't necessarily get constructed languages turning into natural languages, but we could look at some of the languages that we call natural languages and see them as kind of more constructed than others in a way that they just, because of the way in which they've formed. And of course, there's a lot of language standardization goes on where people are kind of pruning languages. So if you look at efforts to, particularly in say French, So the efforts to stamp out the borrowing of English words into French and to develop French words for things, that's like a kind of, it's not necessarily creating an artificial language, but it's artificially controlling language change. And at the other end of the scale, doing things like creating new words for a language in order to create gender-neutral terms, for example. That's another example of kind of artificial language change, where we're kind of imposing change from outside of a language rather than just allowing societal interaction to shape the language change in whatever way it will.
There is a lot of layers to this, I think, that you've sort of identified there. And Dominic, I'll go back to you. You were talking about how Star Wars in English in the Star Wars franchise is sort of the galactic language. Is English not a universal language on Earth?
Look, it is, and there have been many forms of English. There was Globish, there's plain English, there's easy English. All of those are created to sort of facilitate communication in English between various groups of people, maybe with less ability or target, specific contexts. But English is kind of a universal language, but at the same time, it's linked to some sort of culture. It's linked to something that maybe not everybody wants to share. So if you learn Klingon and you want to speak Klingon to somebody, you share a passion that's very specific.
Yes.
So I guess to that degree, artificial languages are kind of fun. There aren't any native speakers of Klingon, but you can learn it at university. And in Star Trek, for example, there's another language called Vulcan, and they've not designed that language. They've not created it artificially. They've done more of a Star Wars exercise of cosmetically making it sound exotic. But they've done it over such a long period of time, over so many franchises, that fans have taken ownership of that language and created Vulcan. And you can now read Tolkien's books in Vulcan as well.
Do you think that's the same thing that happens in the real world with countries or nations and groups of people who, over time, it becomes a language or it grows out of?
Absolutely. And sometimes a language can be 99.9% identical, but considered a different language because guess what? They've got a different army.
Yeah, right.
So there's also the sort of a political dimension to what a language is.
That's
not just linguistic.
Yeah.
In fact, generally it's historically delimited or geographically or politically.
Yeah, it's what we've seen. But no, we can unpack this for hours and hours. But thank you so much for coming on the program today, Dominic, and helping us out. And Nick, out there, thanks for coming on the program and having a chat to us.
Thank you.
Easy done. All right, Eva, would you like to summarise in Dothraki what the program was about?
I'm still learning. But what I will say is this, that we at Polaron translate, I think the last time we checked was 176 different languages. Wow. And some of them are quite rare. Some of them are Creole or Pidgin languages, which, when you mention the languages get created. Yes, they get created across rivers because two nations want to speak to each other. So they come up with this kind of artificial language that's a natural language at the same time to be able to communicate. So a country like Vanuatu or Papua New Guinea, they have hundreds of different languages, and what language you speak might depend on which little tiny area or which tribe you're part of. Very, very interesting discussion, and I think Dothraki, next time I come in, I'll be able to speak it fluently.
Fantastic, guys, thank you. So, if you have any questions about how to reach your multicultural audiences, get in touch with the team at Polaron. The contact details are there on the screen. I'm Mike Loader. I'm thinking about Star Wars at the moment. But thank you so much for joining us on the program, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Be well.
The news stream never sleeps. As the sun rises above Melbourne, New York rings the final bell. Then Singapore comes online and Hong Kong's in play. The Middle East pushes for change and Europe makes its move.
We've got your ticket to the world right here.
Watch the world unfold with Adrian Franklin, journalist and first with breaking news. Market-moving perspectives on the stories shaping your day. Ticker News, weekdays with Adrian Franklin.